The phone rang again. Holly leapt up from the floor and grabbed the receiver. "Hello, Holly Swain speaking," she said. "Yes, he's here." She put the receiver to her chest and yelled at the top of her lungs, "Daddy! Phone!" Swain emerged from his bedroom down the hall, doing up the buttons on a clean shirt. The belt around his jeans dangled from his waist, and his hair was still dripping from the shower. He gave Holly a crooked smile as he took the phone from her. "Do you think the whole neighborhood now knows I've got a phone call?" Holly shrugged as she danced away toward the refrigerator. "Hello," Swain said into the phone. "It's me again." It was Wilson. Swain glanced at the microwave clock. "Hey, what are you doing? It's almost 6. Where are you?" "I'm still at home." "Status check. 0046 to electrification." "Home?" "The car won't start. Again," Wilson said, deadpan. Swain just laughed. Hawkins was bored. Idly, he poked his head inside the library's central stairwell, flicked on his heavy police flashlight. White marble stairs flanked by solid oak banisters rose in a wide spiral up into the darkness. Hawkins nodded. Had to hand it to these old buildings. They were built to last. "Status check. 0015 to electrification." Parker stood up from her seat behind the information desk. She gazed lazily around the atrium, squinting in the darkness. "What are you doing?" she called. "Just looking around." "Status check. 009 to electrification. Stand by." Parker walked over to Hawkins. He was standing at the doorway to the stairwell, his flashlight on, peering up into the darkness. 06. She stopped next to him. "Nice old place," Hawkins said. "Yeah," Parker nodded. "Nice." 04, 03, 02, 01. Stand by. Electrification initialized. At that moment, while Hawkins and Parker stood in the stairwell, bright blue sparks flashed out from the main entrance to the library. An electric blue current shot up between the large glass doors, while sizzling claws of electricity lashed out around the edges of the door frame. Every single window of the library shook as tiny forks of blue lightning shot out from their panes. At the small side entrances to the library, yellow police tape bubbled slowly, boiling under the intense heat of the electricity now flowing through the doors. And then, in an instant, it stopped. All the windows and doors giving access to the library were suddenly still, suddenly silent again. The State Library, old and dark, stood somberly in the darkness of New York City, its magnificent glass doors gray in the moonlight. To the casual observer a few feet away, they looked regal and austere, just as they had looked the day before. It was only when one came close that one would see the intermittent flash of tiny blue lightning that licked out from between the two huge doors every few seconds, just as it did at every other entrance to the library. "Status check. Electrification complete. Dispatch grid coordinates of the labyrinth. Commence teleportation." Holly grabbed onto Swain's leg. Swain shook it playfully as he spoke into the phone. "It won't be much of a surprise anyway. I already heard who won." "You did?" Swain frowned down at Holly as she reached into his jeans pocket. "Yes, unfortunately I did." Holly pulled her hand out of his pocket and frowned at the object in her hand. "Daddy, what's this?" Swain glanced down at her and cocked his head in surprise. "May I?" he said. Holly gave him the small silver object. "What's going on?" Wilson asked. Swain turned it over in his hand. "Well, Dr. Wilson, maybe you can tell me. Maybe you can tell me why my daughter has just pulled a Zippo out of my jeans. My jeans that you borrowed for your little cowboy thing on the weekend." Wilson hesitated. "I have absolutely no idea how that got there." "Why don't I believe you?" All right, don't start," Wilson said. What are my chances of getting my lighter back? Swain put the cigarette lighter back into his pocket. I don't know. 60-40? Status check. Teleportation sequence initialized. 60-40? Holly grabbed another drink from the refrigerator. Swain shifted the telephone to his shoulder and bent down to pick her up. He grunted under the weight. God, you're heavy. Initialize teleport. Earth. Dad, come on, I'm 8 now. Too old to be picked up, huh? All right. At that moment, the room around Swain began to brighten. A mysterious white glow filled the kitchen. Daddy? Holly gripped his shoulders tightly. Swain turned around slowly, staring, mesmerized at the soft white light glowing around him, growing around him. Growing. The kitchen was getting brighter. The light was gathering intensity. Swain spun. All around him, the soft white glow had become a dazzling white light. Wherever he turned, his eyes reeled at the brilliant light. It seemed to come from every direction. He lifted his forearm to shield his eyes. Daddy, what's happening? Swain held her closer, pushed her head into his chest, guarding her from the light. He squinted as his eyes tried to penetrate the blinding wall of white light surrounding them, searching for a source. Recoiling from the light, he abruptly looked down at his feet and saw a perfect circle of white light ringing his sneakers. And then Swain realized. He was at the center of the light. He was the source. Gusts of wind shot through the kitchen. Dust and paper swirled around Swain's head as he held Holly close to his chest. He shut his eyes, bracing himself against the screaming wind. Then, strangely, above the howling of the wind, he heard a voice. A soft, faint, insistent voice saying, Steve? Stephen Swain, are you still with us? It took him a second to realize that it was the phone. Wilson was still on the line. Swain had forgotten that he was still holding onto the phone. Stephen, what's going on? Steve! The phone went dead. A deafening thunderclap boomed, and Swain was instantly plunged into complete darkness. Second movement. 30th November, 6:04 p.m. A lot of people would say that fear of the dark is nothing but a phenomenon of childhood. A child fears the dark simply because he or she does not have the experience to know that in fact nothing is there. But as Stephen Swain knew, fear of the dark was common in many adults. Indeed, for some, the human need for sight was often as basic as the need for food. Standing in pitch darkness, without a clue where he was, Swain felt it strange that he should be thinking of his college studies in human behavior. He remembered his lecturer saying, "Human fears are very often irrational constructs of the mind. How else would you explain a 6-foot-tall woman being petrified by the mere sight of a single white mouse, a creature barely 4 inches long?" But no fear was seen as more irrational or more innate in man than a fear of the dark. Academic theorists and weary parents had been saying for centuries that there was nothing in the dark that was not already there in the light. But I'll bet something like this never happened to them, Swain thought, as he stared into the sea of blackness around him. Where the hell are we? His heart pumped loudly inside his head. He could feel a wave of panic spreading slowly through his body. No, he had to stay calm, rational, had to look after Holly. He felt for her at his shoulder. She held him tightly, frightened. Daddy... If he could just see something, he thought, trying to contain his own ever-increasing fear. A break in the darkness, a splinter of light, anything. He looked left, then right. Nothing. Only black, endless, seamless black. A fear of the dark didn't seem quite so irrational now. Daddy, what's happening? He could feel Holly's head pushed close against his shoulder. I don't know, honey. Swain pursed his lips in thought, and then he remembered. "Wait a minute," he said, stretching his hand awkwardly underneath Holly to reach into his jeans pocket. He breathed a sigh of relief as he felt the cold, slippery metal of the lighter.